Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. It's a podcast where we break down and celebrate the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time, and we are in the midst of season 1 dedicated to reanimating young Frankenstein. I'm Alan Sanders, your host.
And I'm Walt Murray, your co-host.
And our guests today, our radio friends from the giant geeky bowl of sugary cereal and Saturday morning cartoons, BK on the air. We've got BK and Commander Clark, who are both here to help close out the work week. Welcome back to this electric atmosphere of Frankenstein's laboratory.
Thank you.
That may be the most insightful response we've had all week.
No, appreciate it. We're glad to be here, and we've been having a ton of fun with this podcast, talking about something we
Sugar
love.
good.
That's
Well,
right.
You've made it to Friday. Everyone here listening, it's Friday. It's the end of the work week, and what better way to spend it than, I don't know, a man with a God complex getting ready to reanimate the dead.
But enough about me. This podcast. I knew he was going to say that about me every time I come.
Nothing I'd rather
do.
I was about to say, that sounds like BK.
Yes. What are you talking about?
That's called show prep for Saturday.
Wow.
That was perfect.
Well, we welcome you guys back to the Wilder Ride, minute 45 here. We begin with the continuation of Dr. Frankenstein's monologue, where we hear the words, "Fear our own mortality," and we will end with Igor being directed to head over to the equipment because they are ready to supercharge the creature with all of the lightning and the electricity and the generator and who knows whatever voodoo magic that needs to go on to make this happen. So let's start off with this monologue. One of the things I commented on last minute was Gene Wilder has the ability to take a line that is already a fairly energetic and a fairly loud line and find a new layer and yet a new layer and yet a new layer. And it's like he knows how far he can go, even though we think there's no way he can go any further. And yet he finds a way to go one step further each time.
Yeah, he does. And, you know, it's funny as we're looking at these minutes and as we get to this minute, we're seeing him break down and warp and morph into the very thing he didn't want to be, but doing it with such crazy enthusiasm.
He does do that. He does the build-up in this movie, especially during this creation scene. He also, I'll get off topic here for a minute, he also does it in Willy Wonka. He has a way of doing that, Willy Wonka, with his dialogue. He does it in The World's Greatest Lover. There's a couple of scenes where he does exactly that with the dialogue. It builds to a crescendo, and if you read it in the script, you're like, oh, it's there's an exclamation at the end there, and then build it up. No, Gene does it in a way, like maybe nobody else can do, and his hair moves on its own.
His hair moves
on its own. And there's actually a scene in The Woman in Red where he kind of does that too, believe it or not. When we finally get to that movie, we'll talk about it. But what Alan said was right. He can take, when you think he's topped out,
yep,
he hasn't.
He goes another level
out yet. So, and they kind of say you don't want to do that as an actor. Sometimes they're like, don't start at the top.
Right.
Give me this and then build up. A side note of that, Nicholas Meyer told Ricardo Montalban that in The Wrath of Khan. When he showed up in the first scene, he started yelling all of his dialogue to Chekhov and them when they found him. He's like, oh, it's great. How am I going to tell him to pull back? He's Ricardo Montalban. And he did. And he agreed with him. He's like, you're right. Maybe I should start down here and I wind up here at the end. Well, Gene can do it the other way.
Yeah.
I don't know many other actors that can do that. And he certainly does it here in Young Frankenstein.
Needed to start down here at the rich Corinthian leather.
And then move
and
up.
Eventually
move up to the real leather or whatever we got.
Whatever.
So, that's right.
Instead of a made up fake, plastic
Naugahyde
Chrysler
or whatever
leather,
it's called.
whatever that was.
Yeah. So, but you're right about that. Gene's amazing. Gene can animate.
He can, and you have the sense all through the movie, I mean, from the very beginning up to this minute, where the crazy wasn't too far under the surface. It was kind of bubbling there.
It was there. It was lurking.
It was lurking.
The Frankensteins have a problem with that. They just obviously do.
They really do.
It's in the back of their head somewhere.
Yeah,
well, that and as you
family
listen to the speech, though, the words he is saying. I mean, laughing at the earthquakes and ascending to the heavens where he is now elevating himself to be God. He holds his arms out like Christ-like or like a priest during a mass or something, and it's amazing.
There's very much that imagery that Walt brought up yesterday, the whole that this is some type of a ceremony, that there is a religious connotation. I mean, let's face it, God made man. Right? God took dust and made man. He had a creation. The world was created. We had the Bible opens with the steps of making the earth and he made man. And we now have Gene Wilder very much acting like the priest at the altar. Well, perfect analogy here, being now arisen to the heavens, arms splayed wide, with the creature that he's about to animate as if now he is God and he is playing God with this creature.
Yeah, and you see in the biblical account that God breathes into the dust and man takes his first breath. And in a sense, that's what Dr. Frankenstein is doing here. And you see that shadow on the wall of him with his arms out and the Christ-like likeness. This is amazing imagery. It's a beautiful scene. I mean, it is a really beautiful scene. And it's one of the most powerful scenes ever in any comedy, I would have to say.
And this scene is not funny.
No, it's not.
There's
It's
not a
very
bit of comedy
intense.
to this at all.
But the other thing about it, though, is yes, it's very religious. But if you think about what he's saying, especially when he mentions it's science, he's tearing down the faith element of the religion and replacing it with, here is science. Here is the proof. You know, so I'm like, it's interesting. It's like
But
almost
it's
a paradoxical scene.
Even though he's trying to do that, saying, well, now we've got science, it's still every bit a religious ceremony.
Oh, it is. Oh, it is.
It's got the same imagery. It's got the same format. Again, it's got a ceremony. We're following a path. You couldn't just start. He had to deliver the speech. You had to put the electrodes in place. You had to do. There was an order to this to make it all happen.
And Premiere Magazine, when you guys say they're pretty impressive in the world of entertainment, Premiere Magazine, you've heard of them.
Sure.
I remember them.
Where would you think that they
They're
rank?
like at the forefront.
Yeah, where would you think they rank Gene Wilder's performance as Dr. Frederick Frankenstein on the 100 greatest performances of all time? Where do you think he falls on that list? Because I got it, and it surprised me, not because of where it is, but because of because where it is. Maybe that's why it surprised me.
Not because of where it is, but
Yeah, that's right.
where it is.
So I'll
Okay, good. I'm
backpedal
glad
there,
there's a
yeah.
distinction there because I was worried because if it was the former, I don't know, but the latter, I think I
was just
can
making
follow.
sure that you were listening to me.
Well,
In terms of all performances of all
out of
time,
100, out of the
male-
100 greatest performances of all time in motion pictures, obviously, Premiere Magazine.
Wow.
Where do you think they ranked him, this performance in Young Frankenstein, as Dr. Frederick Frankenstein?
I don't know because there's some good
There's
movies
100.
out there.
There's 100 of them.
you know, before we started breaking this movie down, I would have said, because I'm biased and I like this movie, I would have put it in the top 20.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm glad he's in the top 100. That's great that he made the
Oh,
list.
no question. I would say, having, as we've broken this down and as we've watched, I'll keep wanting to say the deterioration of Dr. Frankenstein and Dr. Frankenstein. That's not what it is. It's more the realization of who he is. I would put it in the top 5.
You'd put it in the top 5. Wow, that's interesting. The top
want me to
5.
say that again?
Okay.
This
Top
time
5.
again, Mike?
The top 5. How about you, Mike?
Actually, it's 100 best performances of all films of all time. I'm
Of all.
sadly going to rank it a little bit lower, but I think it's still, I don't know, number 47.
Number 47.
So more in the
You're pretty close to
middle of the
50.
Middle, yeah,
Okay,
middle.
yeah. All
I
right.
was thinking somewhere around 25, the top 25. You have the college 25, for the rankings. I'm going to say somewhere in the top 25.
He actually got ranked by Premiere Magazine at number 9.
Wow.
It's
Number
in top
9.
10. It's in the top 10
Wow.
of greatest performers of all time.
Performances
of all time.
That's
in motion
amazing.
picture history. Premiere Magazine.
Well, and the reason that I would put him that high is because this is an iconic role. This is Dr. Frankenstein. And it's a comedy-ish, but he plays it to perfection. And he really, for me, owns Dr. Frankenstein.
I would argue that it belongs there, and Willy Wonka would have belonged in the top 10 just as easily as this performance would
Yeah.
have. For me, anyway.
Yeah, and
As
you
far as
take the
characters
other
go.
roles. Take, the Lady in Red and Silver Streak and all of our other favorites. They're not iconic roles. He's great in them, but they're not iconic. And this is an iconic role.
The closest would be Willy Wonka to an
Right.
iconic because everyone, even kids
absolutely.
today, know the
Absolutely.
Gene Wilder Willy Wonka.
You'd almost have to set those two performances in films just aside from every other film that he's done. You really would.
You have
as far
to.
as characters go. You're right. Yeah, I agree with that. The
I'm
number 9.
surprised it's that high, but I'm not
9.
surprised. because there are so many good movies, and sometimes comedies often get overlooked in these kinds of things as serious acting.
Oh, yeah.
I will tell you, he would have been happy to hear that if he was alive when that came out, because he said of all the films he's done, he was the most proud of this movie.
And I can see why.
As he should be.
And on the commentary, Mel Brooks actually says during this scene, very appropriately, he thought Gene Wilder should have been nominated for Academy Award for this. And, one would say, well, it's a comedy. And I'm like, yeah, but it's, like you said, it's more than that.
It is more.
It really is more than that.
But
Well,
I think
didn't Brooks use the term he was a Prometheus himself during this scene, that he took on that level as though he was some gigantic monster that you couldn't contain. You just had to let it go.
And we said that earlier. He's more modern day Prometheus-like here in the scene with that dialogue. That's the closest.
Well, and think about the character, too. Dr. Frankenstein, he's going to be compared to Colin Clive. And all the other ones that come before it. Kenneth Branagh. He wasn't there yet, but I'm saying the ones before him.
Played Victor Frankenstein.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and he does it in a way, again, that it isn't funny. It's very serious.
Well, and I think we've talked about this on the BK show, that many times awards are given to serious movies, and not serious, but movies that you perceive as serious. And I think one of the reasons that Star Wars didn't win as many awards when it first came out, and this movie probably the same way, is because people went, oh, it's a comedy.
Right.
People with Star Wars went,
and we
oh,
know
it's
how
sci-fi.
the Academy operates.
Right.
Comedy, that type of thing doesn't get an award. Certain ones don't win that type of thing. But I don't think that they're any less important.
No.
Especially
comedy is one of the hardest things to do.
Comedy is
dying is easy. Comedy is hard.
Right.
Well, and I would say when you put comedy in the context of this movie, it's even harder.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have this is a monster movie that is a comedy, but you've just watched this actor take his character and transform him from kind of a bumbling sort of guy who's trying to figure out who he is, whose girlfriend really doesn't love him.
His life's been interrupted by this will that he's got to go overseas.
Yeah, it's kind of a nuisance.
Yeah.
And he's got a successful career. He's well respected. And then he's now elevating himself to a godlike character.
He's playing Dr. Frankenstein.
He's Dr. Frankenstein.
Well, not all dramatic actors, and you'll know this, Alan, not all dramatic actors can do comedy properly.
Correct.
They can't. But a lot of comedic actors can do drama.
It's amazing how much that a comedic actor, and they say a lot of comedy comes out of pain and
Right.
hurt.
Because you've
and
gone
that's why
through
they
it.
can
Yeah.
tap into it.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. And that's totally believable. And I believe that of Gene Wilder that he can do both, and he did do both. Robin Williams did both. You can just name a lot of funny guys that can be serious. But this scene is one of the best scenes in the film. And like I said before, I'm glad we're here to talk about this scene because it's pivotal.
I want to bring up a moment where I think they took out what would be a very funny joke, but I'm glad they took it out. So far, we're still batting. Well, wouldn't you say we're batting 1,000 on what was left out versus what we thought maybe they should have ad-libbed or put in?
I have to.
Oh, so
agree.
you mean they shouldn't have taken this one out?
No. There's a line here that I'm glad they took out.
I'm glad they took it out.
filmed it, but they took it out.
Yeah, I think nearly every time you've said they had this line in there, it's on the cutting room floor. We have said if that line was in there, it would have made the scene less. It would have made the movie less.
Now, I want to get your opinion on this because I think it would have made it. It would have been a very funny line, but I think it would have ruined the tone of the scene. This monologue that Gene Wilder has, we talked about it, very science replacing the mysticism of religion with a new religion, science. That's the new God. And he's basically shouting all these things that we're going to hurl the gauntlet of science into the frightful face of the ancient enemy. Tonight we shall do battle with death. Tonight we shall ascend into the heaven. We shall command the thunders. We shall mock the earthquakes. We shall harness the lightning and penetrate into the very womb of impervious nature herself. Igor then says, "You sure we can get to all of it tonight?" Now that's funny.
That is funny.
Because it's a pretty big list of what he wants to accomplish. Yeah. You sure we can get through all this tonight?
But you're right, it would have ruined the tone of the
I
scene.
100% agree that was taken out because this is the one moment where we didn't need to lose this dramatic part of this scene.
But it would have been funny.
It would have, again.
It would have been funny.
And
It would have
that's
been total Igor.
So we all
Yeah.
agree it would have
Yeah.
been very funny for him to say it. We all would have laughed. But I think it would have completely lessened
It would have.
the entire monologue that we just had served up to us magnificently by Gene Wilder.
Yeah.
And Igor has already had a couple of moments like that already.
He
It
has.
would be a little too much to give him.
It is
another
very
one,
much
right.
Igor's character. And honestly, it's a very Mel Brooks line. That is a great Mel Brooks line. It would have been totally inappropriate for the scene.
Yeah. I'm glad this one's on the cutting room floor. Again, we can laugh at it. That's the great about having the script in front of us to know how they initially conceived this scene. But I think that's one of those moments, once you see it actually in the editing room and you're watching it and you're getting a sense of where we are in terms of mood, tone. I mean, we've just had this beautiful series of shots with shadow and light, the black and white playing just magnificently in this scene. Barry, you said this before. You turn off the volume and you're watching this. This is not a comedy.
Not
we
at
are
all.
watching
a classic
master horror film,
Right.
a monster film that is beautifully shot.
Yes, beautifully shot by Gerald Hirschfield, as a matter of fact, a guy who has been working in films most of his life. He was the cameraman on The Car, movie The Car.
Oh, yeah. I love The Car.
My Favorite Year with Peter O'Toole. He
Another
shot that
great
film.
movie.
And he's got 2 or 3 films under his belt. Not a lot, but what he did work on, it was good. And he has a lot to take credit for how this movie looks. As we know, the cameraman always does have some credit that he can take for making movies look the way they do. But
The
also
cameraman and the lighting.
there's another scene here where he's giving he starts that monologue, and then it's broken up and he stops for a moment and he motions to them with his hand to start cranking me up.
Begin the ascension.
But do you notice what happens when he does that? They do it. But when he does it, he stops and does it. As soon as he points his finger, there's a thunderclap. It's almost like on cue, there's thunder right there when he did it. That was funny, but it did not break this scene up. It was actually pretty epical when he did that. Were they intended for that to happen or not? I've just directed thunder to strike, or lightning to strike, with my hand motion, and I thought that helped it.
I think, again, it was just to add to the
but it's a
intensity
little
of
touch
it.
there. It's a little touch, because there's nothing until he does this.
No, I know.
It's kind of cool. So another thing to observe.
For folks not too into the Hollywood titles or what they do and what different things are, BK, I know you know this, so explain to the audience.
I don't know what a gaffer is.
What does the Foley artist
Nobody
do, or
does.
what's Foley work when you start talking about filmmaking? What's Foley?
Foley work is mostly, I guess, sound work. And what you don't understand is some people might not know this. We know it. But when you're watching a motion picture, almost every sound you hear in the film is usually never recorded right there when they're there. I mean, almost all of it. They have to add it later. Now, of course, obviously the dialogue, even a lot of the dialogue is dubbed over.
Some of it can be through ADR, automatic
there are
dialogue
some movies
replacement.
where the entire movie's dubbed. Not because it's in a foreign language. It's just dubbed over for some odd reason. They've had to dub the dialogue.
Clarity.
But and they go through a lot of work to get the sounds that they do come up with. We've worked on short films where you're like, how are we going to make, you do the fire by crackling onion skins, or you need a body to fall down. You'll throw a bag of sand onto the ground. It makes that noise. Now I have no idea what Foley work sound they made when he touched his hump. It sounds pretty rudimentary. It sounds pretty easy. I'm like, oh, that's probably something you just
Coconut.
I say
smacking
coconut.
smacking something together. But yeah, Foley work is incredibly important.
Well, the reason I bring that up, because there's a lot of good Foley in this, but I found this note that I thought was interesting about this scene as this platform is coming up on its 4 chains. Designer Dale Hennessy based this Gothic lab on Charles D. Hall's original set. We've talked about the original equipment, but the set designer for this also went to the original Frankenstein to kind of lay out the set. This clanking platform was actually so loud, they never bothered to Foley it later. They just let the microphones roll in the scene, trusting that Gene could outshout the sound of the clanks. So basically, as this is going up and you hear the tuk, 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 that was actually while he was filming. That was
on the
not
set.
a Foley effect.
Wow.
That's
and if anybody
crazy.
could overpower it with their dialogue, Gene Wilder could.
And he certainly did. Oh, yeah.
That's great. No, I did not know that.
I didn't know
I'll
that
have
either.
to check. You'll have to do another poll on the Wilder Ride listener page on Facebook and do a poll on things I learned.
Things I learned.
And I'll have to check that box because I was not aware of that.
Yep.
That's a
No, I found
great
it
fact.
ironic when I was looking for more material. Doing my show notes for today, I stumbled across a great FAQ of things that you may not have known that were in Young Frankenstein. And I found I've got 7 pages of new notes. So I found like a treasure trove of things that I did not know before even tonight.
Well, that's good because you got a few more minutes of the movie to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's
A
perfect.
handful.
And I know we never go down rabbit trails, but I'll make an exception here. When I meet a Foley person, I am going to let them have it over one thing. Whenever there's a car chase and they're chasing through dirt and they have car tire squeals, that drives me crazy. And it particularly in 70s and 80s
Stop
TV
watching
shows.
Dukes of Hazzard.
I know, it is the Dukes of Hazzard. They are the number one offenders. But they'll be driving
they
down
even
a
did it
dirt
in
road and you
Smokey
hear
the
tire
Bandit, too.
squeals. What is wrong with them?
It sounds better.
It does.
It's a little more
I
dramatic.
know. And it emphasizes the fact that you're having a car chase. And
That's
blah,
why
blah, blah.
punches never sound like punches in movies, but they sound so much better in a movie than in real life.
I know they sound like a wet rag hitting a wall.
Especially
It's
like
awesome.
if you're a fan of Indiana Jones. I mean, he has bass thud come off of his hits.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a whip
Oh, yeah.
crack. There's actually an embedded whip crack. A true whip crack, as well as a thud in every punch. Ben Burt, that same guy who did all the Star Wars,
Star Wars.
his sound effect, which I think is you talk about Foley work. He took a bat against a leather jacket for the thump, and then added the whip crack, and that is how you get the punches. So you talk about the artistry of
perfect.
Foley work. That's how we made the punch sound.
Until I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, I'd never heard that particular punch sound effect before because it had never existed till it came out. Ben came up with it. That's right.
Ben,
crazy.
The only thing
He's a
Ben
genius.
repurposes is stuff that Ben invented.
Right.
he,
right.
he does. he
He's
doesn't
a
go to the
wizard.
There's no CD. Oh, where's my 10,000 sounds of cinema? You know, he's not doing.
You bring a sound effect CD into Ben Birkin, he will. That's an insult to him.
Save for the Wilhelm screams that apparently everyone
Yes.
needs to have at
You
some
gotta have
point.
those.
That's right.
I always like the laser sounds where the wires that hold up
hold
the
the poles
telephone
up,
poles.
the
and
cables,
He
yeah.
hits it, and that's the sound.
right.
The pew pew.
Foley work is important, and I didn't know that.
Yep, pew pew.
I'm always amazed by Foley work, but then when I came across this note that they truly left, that's a lot to leave.
That is.
I mean, that's a lot of
yeah.
noise. At some point, you think, hey, we need to figure a way to make sure this makes no noise so we
Right.
don't lose the actor.
And I hope they had some way to check it after they shot it to make sure it was all right, because wasn't a lot of. I don't know when video monitoring in movies came into play.
They
some of
would
them
not
used them in
have
the
known.
80s.
Yeah.
but I don't know how
They'd
they'd
have gotten
known
it in
that.
the dailies.
Before,
the
you would have
next
had to wait for
day.
the next day for the overnight shoots to have been developed.
The dailies.
And then you can go look at the dailies the next day and see if it worked.
And then you find out whether you need to call Gene back in and the
Right.
Foley guy to
Guess
redo
what?
this.
We're reshooting scene 61.
I did such a good job on that scene. I'll never do it again in the studio as well.
never.
Thank God
that
he
is
didn't have to.
something I don't know how many takes. We know that a lot of the comedy bits, they talked about sometimes 30 takes just to be able to get through the bit.
Well, I heard, he kept cracking up.
Right.
Cloris Leachman would talk about that. He would
Yeah.
just always start laughing.
But this one almost feels like he probably did it in a few takes. I'm pretty sure this was one of those serious moments that, I mean, obviously they have more camera placements. You've got different places where they're
Right.
shooting the scene, but it sounds, this to me, the best line delivery in the entire film, this monologue. I mean, it's a good movie, but in terms of just pick a moment that says, how do you demonstrate how good Gene Wilder is? This is the monologue you play.
Well, from what I can tell, he cracked up at Feldman and when he was in scene with other actors. Now, I don't see how this monologue would crack him up. He probably did it fairly well in maybe a
would think
take or
so.
two. Hopefully, one take would have been nice. One take, Gene.
He'll lose his
That would
voice.
have been nice, but
Imagine him to do this over and over. He'd be hoarse by the end of
and
it.
he's yelling anyway, so
Exactly.
he'll lose his voice. So yeah.
Well, and I haven't really thought about the fact that those four chains were supporting that table and two very expensive actors lifting them through the building there. There's a lot involved in this scene. I bet they tried to do it in as few takes as possible.
And this is easily 30 or 40 feet up.
Oh, yeah.
This is a real, true working set. This is not digital effects. This is not
Right.
a matte painting below to make it look like there's a drop below. This is truly a set piece that was designed and worked for real. That's hence the noise.
Well, and you can see when they get to the tower, and this is the first time I've noticed that the lift that they're on continues to kind of sway and wobble a little bit while they're finishing up that scene.
Now, Terry Garr was the one that got the most irked at Gene because obviously didn't do it here because he's doing a monologue by himself. But they had a reunion not too long ago with just almost all the surviving people that are still around, including Mel, where they were talking about it. I think it's at the Paley Center in California or somewhere. And Terry says she could not stand working with Gene because he would crack up, and she's like, I'm not used to that. I'm an actress fresh out of, classically trained and everything. And you wouldn't think she would be, but she was. And she couldn't stand it. And it's hard to look at Terry there at the reunion because Terry was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1999 and has been going downhill since. Yeah. And we always talk about how some of our people that we grew up with are childhood actors and heroes that we're always used to seeing them a certain way.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to see Terry in the wheelchair because she's wheelchair bound now.
Right.
And she looks really
Too
kind of
bad.
nothing like she did. And it's not her fault. It's just something that she got.
We all get older, Colin.
But it was, some more than others.
Yes,
but,
exactly.
But it was hard to see her. But it was great to see them back together talking like that, and the brightness and the happiness kind of returned to her face every time Mel would tell a story. And most of his stories were complimentary stories about Terry and her performance in this movie, and he was glad he cast her. And
well, I know Cloris Leachman initially felt similar, not necessarily to the point of anger, but she was irked a lot.
A little annoyed, yeah.
But
It's like, can we just get through this scene?
success in Paycheck solves and
yes.
covers over a lot of hurt.
It would
Yes,
be.
it does.
It would me, yeah. It would ease the pain.
Yeah, me
very
too.
well.
Well, and I think it's
keep the
hard
money
too
coming.
when you're working with someone like that. I mean, you're going into work every day. You're trying to get through your scenes. You're trying to do a good job. It's hard to appreciate, and I say this to you guys working with me. It's hard to appreciate how good somebody is sometimes when you're working with
I
them.
know that,
It's only
yes.
till later that you really appreciate them.
Exactly. We know.
Okay.
Never
I'm
gonna be
sure
on-
y'all
you're-
fully appreciate.
You're never going to be on the
exactly
show
what
again, okay? You understand that now.
But I would bet that
Well, no, it's like you said when you were doing
like
Into
to-
Darkness. And Cumberbatch was getting so mad at Zachary
Yeah.
Quinto all the time because he's like,
That's
all
Star
serious
Trek
and-
Into Darkness for people who are
whatever.
wondering what that is.
I don't like to say Star Trek before that.
May not know what you're talking about.
yeah, no, but you could see that he was getting a little irritated with
And it sounds like Terry Gar was the same way.
probably.
But a lot of these camera angles during the scene, Alan, especially when he's going up and we get the shadow of Gene against the wall. That's again a throwback to older films from the 30s. Michael Curtiz did that for the Seahawk for Errol Flynn. A lot of the sword fight in that movie. Well, some of it was shot backlit, and
Yeah.
the big giant shadows were on the wall. So that's kind of a throwback to the older films that Mel included in this movie and this scene, and it works perfectly. It's so appropriate to have it there.
Before we bring this to an end, because we've got a lot to cover next week, we only just get the platform upstairs and we get the command to Igor to, head over to the get ready to throw the first switch. And of course, he replies with his third time now, yes, master. Because he says, when I give you the word, throw the first switch. And he goes running over there and yes, master. I want to just briefly go back in just one moment back to the lab, and I just love the composition of the shot of the laboratory in full action. None of this stuff makes any sense with what it's doing, and yet it's so perfect for what we're trying to paint here. You've got the little Bunsen burners under some of these giant vials that are bubbling and smoking. Yes. You've got electricity crawling up in some of the other tubes. You've got in the dead center the platform being raised. It's a master far shot where you can even make out Inga and Igor on the far side turning the wheel. It's a beautifully composed shot. This is a master shot, and they don't mind spending some time on it. Today's hyper cuts, it's eyeball, fist, over here, back over here, shoulder, back over here, mouth, lip, tongue. This is pull back, show the whole set.
Oh, yeah.
Let us appreciate the art and the direction of a film that's doing a throwback to how films were shot in the 30s.
And I would urge anyone that if they've never seen it to go back and watch the 31 version of Frankenstein. That's exactly how they did that as well.
Oh, they did.
Just as good. Again, it's what it's
Well, you can see the
homage
massive,
to.
how
It's
big
great.
the set is. And again, we don't know what those machines are doing, but they're doing something. And we believe it,
It paints a beautiful picture of the mad scientist
Exactly.
lab. It's like if you ask a kid who stumbled across even the most rudimentary, scary book for a 5 to 6-year-old and say, okay, now draw the mad scientist lab. This is what it's going to look like.
It's going to include those thingies in the background with something like that, some kind
Bunsen
of
burners,
arc and
tubes,
things.
test tubes, and
Bubbling
electricity.
stuff.
lightning, electricity, and stuff.
Yeah,
Why does it work? Because it does.
and there are certain
Because
jobs
it's a movie.
that as an outsider, you kind of look at everything and go, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense that he would. I don't know what all that stuff does, but it makes sense that would be there. And that is kind of the feel you get here. And we've said this a lot of times as we've gone through these minutes so far. If this had been shot in color, it would not have been anywhere close to as good or close to the amazing scene that this is, shot in black and white.
Mel knew what he's doing and he knew what he wanted.
Absolutely.
The whole movie
vision
would
that
not have
these
had the
guys-
impact that it has
Well,
if it was
I'm
in
going to say
color.
Mel
way.
and Gene because they both
of
were
course.
adamant about
Yeah.
this.
Yep. And I'm really thankful that those guys stood their ground and said, nope, this is a black and white movie. This is what it's going to be. Because this would not have been anywhere close to the great movie that
Well, it would
is.
have looked cartoonish.
It would have.
Especially if it was green makeup on the monster and stuff.
And
No,
they could have walked away from it if they said, no,
Yes.
you are not shooting
They
it
could
that
have.
way. And they might have went, well, we're not going to make it.
Then we won't
and
do
what
it.
a loss to cinema history that would be for us. We wouldn't be here talking about it.
That's true.
And when Mike and I first became friends and met at work, he kind of reintroduced me to the old Frankenstein and the old horror movies that I really didn't have an appreciation for. And when he started lending me his DVDs that I may or may not have returned.
You did.
Okay, good.
Mike introduced me to a lot of movies too, but I can't go into it.
That's a whole different podcast.
Exactly, yeah.
So, but it really did give me more of an appreciation for those old movies and the quality of work that the actors and the producers of the movie did. And you really see in this movie the labor of love that they had here, and they built just such a great movie. In these minutes were these minutes to me, I think, portray what this movie is all about.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Oh,
the ones that we
yes,
went
yes.
through from 41 to, what, 46?
45.
41 to 45.
41 to 45, yes. And I'm glad we're here from 41
Minute
to
45. And we've got so much still to go with the whole, basically the climax. To me, there's multiple climaxes in this film, but this is certainly one of the key, if not the moment, because everything after this, it's either about success or failure, but there's no going back.
No.
If this was another world we love to play in, Star Wars, once you go down that path forever, will it, keep you that way?
Yeah.
That's right.
Something or
It's
other.
kind of like
He's kind of like that.
He's sort of gone off the rails on a crazy train.
Yeah. It was like my dad always said when I was in the bathroom.
Give someone else a turn.
If you allow me to get serious for a second.
How long can it possibly take?
Got the Sears catalog in here,
Your
Dad.
mom said I should talk to you. She said something about every night.
Why are the lingerie pages dog-eared?
And where's the Sears catalog?
Just leave him alone.
It's all right.
He's fine.
It's natural.
He's fine.
Well, we've had a great time this week, and it did end on a fairly heavy note, but it's certainly one of the most dramatic and most memorable scenes. There's so many memorable scenes, but the idea of Dr. Frankenstein, or Frankenstein as he still wanted to call himself, ascending into the heavens with the body of the corpse that he plans to reanimate. We are going to come back and continue this next week, but unfortunately, we are at the weekend. But fortunate for you, the fun doesn't stop if you want to tune in to a show on Saturday that would love to have a topic like this being talked about during the course of BK on the Air. BK, where can they tune in and get you?
And we do. I mean, if there's a Mel Brooks or a Gene Wilder related story or an anniversary come up, we always talk about
Always.
it. Anything movie, television related, comic books, nostalgic geekiness, as we like to call it, every Saturday morning from 10 a.m. till noon Eastern on WBHF Radio. You can listen at WBHFradio.org, or you can download the free TuneIn app for your mobile devices or cell phones or whatever you might have, and you can hear it that way. And if you miss it, we put it up on SoundCloud, so download the SoundCloud app too, which is all free today.
All free today.
And you can hear it there. If you miss the show, you can hear it on SoundCloud. But join us every Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon. We have a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a fun show.
And Walt, it's Friday. Maybe people like to binge and get caught up. So where can people go to find out more about this entire sequence we've been chatting about this week on The Wilder Ride?
To binge and catch up, you can search for us on Stitcher, on iTunes, hopefully on iHeartRadio by this point. You can also find us at www.facebook.com/thewilderride or thewilderride.com, if I can talk for the next 2 minutes. And we'd love for you to join us on any of those platforms and any of those social media sites, and let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. And there's a lot of great stuff being posted on our website, or on our Facebook page. So you definitely need to go there and check that out, see some of the pictures, see some of the comments. It's a lot of fun.
So come back next week, come back Monday. We're going to actually be joined by a pretty important guy in the Movies by Minutes world, Tom Taylor from the Indiana Jones Minute. He'll be joining us to talk a little bit more about this scene, starting with the doctor putting on some pretty cool goggles as he's getting ready to be around electricity. I'm assuming, I didn't know goggles kept you from being electrocuted, but I guess that's how it works. And we'll end with the camera panning down to a still lifeless face. And we'll have that and more all next week if you return for the Wilder Ride.
And hear a little bit more about Dr. Froderickstein.
You know, it's very. It's caused me to do a podcast of my own. I think we're going to do one on the best of Ed Wood.
Okay.
Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be very
It would be
fun.
very short, though.
Yes, it would.
It would be very short. A lot shorter than the Wilder Ride.
I think so. But shorter movies, definitely.
We're going to start that probably next month or something. We'll look into that. So it's good.
All right.
When man first crawled forth from the stinking slime.
The stinking slime. I know some that haven't gotten too far from that.
Yeah, go to a sci-fi. No, never mind.
FurryCon.
Yeah.